I uncovered 5 terrifying secrets that rural hospitals are hiding from patients. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill crept down my spine, prickling my skin. I was just a new intern, hungry to learn, drowning in thick hospital paperwork and the smell of antiseptics. Every day felt the same. Bright lights, hurried footsteps, voices murmuring medical jargon. But then, that door, marked, authorized personnel only. Curiosity took over. I didn't think about the warnings, the whispers of strange happenings. My heart raced as I stepped inside. Darkness engulfed me. The air turned stagnant, held hostage by a cold that seeped into my bones. Shadows danced against the walls, flickering like ghosts from the past. I could hear the faint echoes of distant cries. Patients, I assumed. Or were they lost souls? Unnerving facts ran through my mind. 1. Staff claimed patients went missing, their records disappearing like smoke. I had heard nurse chatter about empty beds, whole wings that had been shut down overnight, like they were trying to erase them. 2. Rumor had it that the hospital was built over an old cemetery. A chilling thought. What if the spirits of those wronged lingered in the hallways, searching for peace? Every creak of the old floorboards sent a jolt through me. My breath hitched when I thought about the inconsistency with medications. Reportedly, some pills were swapped out, replaced by nothing more than sugar. A kind of sick joke? Or worse, could it be a cover-up for something sinister? Whispers drew closer, a murmuring chorus of secrets floating in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that the building itself was alive, pulsating with dark energy, watching me with unseen eyes. 3. They said surgical errors haunted the doctors here. A touch of malpractice brushed under the rug. How many lives had been lost, swept away without a sound? A loud bang resonated through the hallway. Panic coursed through my veins, urging me to escape. I turned back to flee, but the old elevator outside had suddenly ground to a halt years ago and now stood as an ominous monument. People had heard the mechanical whirring, some saying it was haunted. I shivered. Glancing toward the flickering lights above, was something watching? Waiting? As I turned, my heart clawed at my throat. Shadows tangled in the corners, barely discernible. A photo on the wall caught my eye. The smiling staff, but their eyes held an unsettling glint. 5. Some claimed the hospital's board had ties to something darker, a consortium of secrecy. What horrors lay buried beneath the practiced smiles of the doctors? Suddenly, faint whispers morphed into a cacophony of panic. My pulse quickened. That door, the one I should have never opened, creaked ajar. I was not alone. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door slowly creaked wider, revealing a void that seemed to pulsate, pulling me in. My instincts screamed for me to run, but I couldn't look away. Shadows lengthened and twisted, forming shapes I couldn't quite comprehend. Whispers crescendoed into frantic chatter, looming closer. With trembling hands, I fumbled for my phone, its glow seeming inconsequential against the surrounding darkness. Suddenly, it flickered, the battery icon warning me of an impending demise. How long had I lingered here? The flickering light barely illuminated the first words scrawled in red across the peeling walls. They are always watching. Fear gripped me as a soft rustle came from within the room. I let out a stifled breath, calling into the void. Is anyone there? The silence cracked open like glass. In my mind, echoes of the missing patients suffocated me. What if their screams still lingered here, bound by some unspeakable crime? Then, something shifted in the shadows. A figure emerged, pale and gaunt, swaying with an unnatural grace. Its eyes, sunken and hollow, met mine with a gaze that bore through the veil of time. I could tell it once belonged to a patient filled with hope and life. Now, it was the embodiment of despair. It opened its mouth to speak, but only a tortured wail escaped, a sound that clawed at the walls of my sanity. I felt bile rise in my throat, an overwhelming need to escape surging within me. I shouted. The figure shied away, retreating into the darkness. But in that fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of a hospital gown drenched in crimson. My heart raced as I stumbled back, knowing there were deeper horrors waiting to be uncovered. The door shuddered ominously, and a gust of wind swept past me. I spun around, desperate for an exit, and saw that the door was now ajar just enough to reveal another unsettling sight. Twisted faces peering in from the other side. Horrified murmurs rolled in like a wave, echoing words of malice that bubbled like venom. Join us, fueled by horror. I leaped forward, pushing the door closed. But it resisted, a force as though something outside was determined not to let me go. The whispers grew louder, a chaotic frenzy ringing in my ears. I slammed my back against the door, feeling the pressure of unseen hands on the other side. It was a struggle between my will to survive and whatever was waiting in that darkness. I finally managed to shove the door fully shut, heart galloping wildly, as if trying to escape my chest. But as I turned around, a realization gripped me. Other door within that shadowed room had silently slid open. A faint luminescence bathed the space in a bleak blue hue. Curiosity lured me closer, despite the primal instinct to flee. Tentatively, I stepped inside. The air felt charged, a crackling energy mingling with my unease. This room bore the scars of neglect. Medical equipment lay scattered like forgotten memories. I approached a rusted gurney, its wheels still eerily turned, and right beside it, an old bleed sheet had been discarded, stained and brittle. As I knelt down, feeling the weight of its history, a shiver ran through my fragments of forgotten pain, the phantom essence of what had been. Then, beside me, a mirror caught the tainted light. I peered into it, but it reflected more than just my trembling figure. I gasped. Behind Maya's second face emerged, twisted and grotesque, its eyes glimmering with a frenzied hunger. Look behind you, it hissed, voice dripping like honey but fraught with malice. That I whipped around just as a cold, bony hand reached out toward me, and with a sickening clarity, I understood that this was only the beginning. There were deeper things here, waiting for the right moment to pounce. The walls themselves seemed to lean in closer, encroaching upon me. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape this claustrophobic nightmare, when the ground beneath me lurched. Something far more sinister than the twisted souls lurked within those walls. With a heartbreaking cry, I grabbed the edge of the door, pulling it shut just in time. But the silence that followed was more insidious than the chaos before, thick and oppressive. I could feel it creeping into my mind, embedding dark thoughts that clawed for release. Then came the whisper again, slow and deliberate, swirling around me like smoke. You can't hide. We know your secrets. And at that moment, a chilling realization sank into my bones. Whatever horror awaited me had already uncovered my own deepest fears. I jumped as the alarm blared, its deafening wail a stark reminder of my precarious situation. The building was alive, and it welcomed me as one of its own. Just as I thought I had found an escape route, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness once more. The whispers returned, a collective chant flooding my ears, drowning out reason as a weight pressed against my chest. And from the depths of the abyss came an echoing proclamation. You are one of us now. Before I could comprehend what that meant, something cold wrapped around my leg, dragging me down into the darkness. As all around me the air thickened with the rancid stench of despair. I gasped for breath, clawing at the ground, but it was as if the floor itself had turned to quicksand. Then, like the final snap of a noose, everything faded to black. The air was thick and stagnant, stinging my lungs as I struggled to breathe. Darkness enveloped mainstents and suffocating, like an icy shroud. Silence pressed in around me, broken only by the distant echo of my heartbeat racing wildly in my ears. Gradually, I became aware of movement in the pitch blackness. A low, undulating sound that slithered like a serpent through the void, bringing with it a familiar malice. I blinked hard, trying to dispel the shadows that clung to my eyes, but all I could see was the outline of a grim corridor stretching endlessly before me. My heart sank further when I recognized the faint glow trickling from beneath a door further down. It was poorly lit, its golden hue a deceptive invitation laced with treachery. Each step I took echoed, reverberating off the damp walls as I approached. Instinct urged me to turn back, but an unseen force tugged at my core, pulling me closer to the promise of answers or perhaps more horrors. I reached the door and pressed an ear against it, listening closely. The murmur of voices seeped through the cracks, melding into a discordant symphony, their tones weaving through one another like threads of a dark tapestry. Release us. You know the truth. Find out. My resolve cracked under the weight of their insistence. I pushed the door open, the hinges howling in protest as a glaring light flooded the room, momentarily blinding me. There were many bodies strewn across the floor, twisted into unnatural positions. They wore the same hospital gowns, those draped in crimson, their faces frozen in excruciating agony. An overwhelming stench of decay filled my nostrils, turning my stomach. In the center, a hollow figure stood, its skin marred and stretched tight over a skeletal frame. It turned toward me, the corners of its mouth curling into a ghastly grin. "Welcome back," it rasped, the words soaked in acid. My mind reeled at the recognition. The creature before me resembled the gaunt figure I had seen previously. I took a step back, but the door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. There was no escape. "Did you think you'd leave us?" It wheezed, inching closer, its voice resonating like a mocking echo of my own thoughts. "You can never leave. Not now that you remember." An involuntary shudder coursed through me as fragments of memories surged, fleeting images of laughter intertwined with bitter cries surfacing in the depths of my subconscious. Memories dug up like a grave, refusing to stay buried. Desperate, I searched for any means of escape, my eyes darting around the room, landing on a flickering photo frame nearby. It depicted a smiling family, the light feeble as it flickered like a dying star. But the faces shifted, morphing into distorted caricatures, their smiles stretching unnaturally wide as they turned on me, eyes glittering with both want and pain. "Help us," they whispered in unison, the song of sorrow pulling taut like a noose around my throat. Choking back my revulsion, I stumbled toward the door, but the space twisted around me. It felt alive, pulsating with a heartbeat of its own. The once so solid walls wobbled like wet clay, shifting, reshaping, trapping me further within their insidious embrace. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed my palms against the surface, feeling the warmth of something deep beneath the flesh, a writhing mass, hungry and voracious. In the corner of the room, I spotted a monitor flickering ominously, the screen covered in cryptic symbols and images that danced erratically like deranged ghosts. I hesitated, my sanity wavering, but an undeniable curiosity propelled me forward. As I neared, words began to materialize in jagged letters. "Not all secrets are meant to be buried. Discover the truth, and you shall become the keeper." Suddenly shadows launched at me from every direction, a storm of anguished souls clawing at my skin, their whispers rising to a deafening pitch. The command to join them swirled about my head, taking the life I had and tying it to theirs. I felt myself slipping, my resolve waning, the dark promises seeping into me like poison. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the frame from the table, shattering it against the tile floor. The glass splintered, slicing into the air like a scream reverberating through the room. A furious wind erupted, swirling around me as the fractured shards glimmered with a horrific light, and against my better judgment, I rushed towards the portal forming behind the shattered reflection and escape, a chance to flee this living nightmare. But in that moment, as I launched myself through, I felt a hand clasp around my ankle, pulling me back, calling my name in a chorus of imitated voices. Voices like my own but altered and obscured. "You can't escape us. We will always find you." I was torn between dimensions, trapped between the realm of the living and whatever cursed existence lay beyond. A tortured scream escaped my lips as the abyss swallowed me whole, its darkness whispering secrets that would forever remain my burden. And as I was dragged deeper into the shadows, a monstrous laugh echoed through the void, the promise of horror unending. The last thing I felt before everything faded was a chill, as if death itself had caressed my cheek. And then, with a sudden jolt, light returned too bright, too intense, blinding me. My ears rang as I gasped for breath, the world spinning. Then I found myself back in the hospital room, the door wide open, and the voices began anew, this time with a single, chilling chant, rippling through the fabric of reality, echoing the words that would haunt my every thought. You're home now. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an unsettling glow across the familiar starkness of the hospital room. The sterile white walls now felt like a graveyard, cold and uninviting, their surface marred by dark smudges that seemed to writhe under my gaze. I staggered forward, disoriented, my heart racing as I caught sight of my reflection in a cracked mirror hanging askew on the wall. But it was not merely my face that stared back, it was a twisted amalgamation of myself and the tortured souls I had encountered, their anguish skimming the surface of my skin like a haunting tattoo. "Where are you?" I whispered, desperate for an answer. But the room only echoed my voice, mocking me, hurling my words back like shattered pieces of glass. I backed away, almost stumbling over the edge of the bed, my hands grasping for anything solid, anything that belonged to this world and not the nightmare I had just escaped. Or had I? A sudden rush of memories began to seep through the cracks of my mind. Images of twisted nightmares merging with moments that had once been mundane: a doctor with hollow eyes, a nurse whose laughter boomed like thunder, and the muffled sounds of anguished cries piercing the oppressive silence. They screamed for attention, each memory a brick in the wall of dread closing in around me. That I forced myself toward the light streaming in from the open door, the flurry of activity in the corridor beckoning me like a beacon of safety, only to find it warped and distorted. As I stepped into the hallway, it rippled like the surface of a disturbed pond. The noises changed, morphing into a cacophony of pleads and groans, an inescapable symphony of suffering. Patients cradled themselves in their beds, faces pale, eyes sunken, as though life itself had been drained from them. The smell of antiseptic choked the air, mingling sickeningly with an underlying odor I couldn't place. Something sweet yet rotten. "Help us," one of the patients droned, their voice a hollow echo of despair that sent shivers racing down my spine. I turned, seeing a gaunt man glaring directly at me. His gaze was intense, but his body was frail, seemingly on the edge of crumbling. "You shouldn't be here. You mustn't." "I know." I cut him off. Panic lurked behind every syllable. "I need to get out." But the hospital hummed with a life of its own, its walls whispering secrets I could feel pooling beneath my skin. "Stay." The sound drifted around me like a breeze, an invitation laced with powerful coercion. "We need you." I pressed forward, compelled to shove through the oppressive silence. But as each foot fell, the ground felt increasingly unstable, its essence slipping away, revealing dark, yawning lips that threatened to consume me. The corridor snaked onward, growing darker the deeper I ventured. Images of the twisted bodies lingered in my mind. The haunting smiles of the faces I had seen earlier surfaced unbidden, painted with the blood of desperation. They begged me to remember something crucial lost in the depths. As I pressed onward, I noticed a door on my right, marked with a single word: scrap. It pulsed with a sickly green light, the flicker at its edges so beguiling I felt an insatiable pull toward it, an urge that gnawed at my sanity. "What's in there?" I mumbled, half to myself and half to the shadows that lurked just beyond my vision, as if in answer. A horrendous screech erupted from within the room, followed by a chorus of agonized wails that stirred something primal inside me. That word echoed again, more demanding, more insistent. It wasn't just about escape. It was about uncovering the truth. That I approached the door, my breathing erratic, and reached out for the handle. It was cool to the touch, ice pulling me toward a winter of memories I could not escape. My heart thudded loudly against my ribs, urging me to turn away, but curiosity was a far more voracious beast than fear. With a twist, the door swung wide, revealing a dimly lit room littered with disheveled remnants, surgical instruments dulled with rust, empty bottles labeled with acrid contents, and scraps of paper covered in hasty scrawls that scratched at the edges of my mind. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner, too swift, too deliberate. I turned sharply, and there stood a woman, her arms cradling something against her chest. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed, her eyes shadowed under a tangled mess of hair. "They're watching. Always watching." What do you mean?" My pulse thundered, frantic. "They know your secrets," she spat, inching closer with her burden cradled protectively. "Just as you know theirs. You don't belong and neither do they." Before I could respond, an unnatural tremor shook the floor, throwing me off balance. The walls began to shift and groan once more, as if the very building were coming alive, awakening from a deep slumber. In that chaos, her grip loosened, and what she held tumbled to the floor or a fragile doll, its eyes glinting with a light of their own. For an instant, everything froze. The girl, the trembling walls, even my heartbeat. Then the doll's eyes exploded with an incandescent glow, and a terrifying realization washed over me. The screams returned louder than ever, echoing through the room as the shadows convulsed and surged forward, wrapping around me like a suffocating cloak. The woman's expression turned to horror as our gazes locked, her mouth forming silent words, and then darkness. Just as I felt myself plunge into the void, another voice pierced through, chilling and unmistakable, whispering directly into my soul. "Welcome home. The real fun is about to begin." And in the agonizing silence that followed, I finally began to remember. The darkness clung to me like a second skin, enveloping my senses in a suffocating embrace. My lungs burned as I inhaled the staleness of the air, thick with dread and despair. I struggled to remember where I was, my mind a whirlpool of fractured thoughts and incomplete images. The last memory of the doll stared back at me, its glowing eyes a lighthouse in an ocean of black. That a sudden jolt dragged me from the abyss. I stumbled back into consciousness, the cacophony of tortured cries echoing like an unholy anthem. I blinked against the dim light, straining to make sense of my surroundings. The dank room was the same, yet somehow different. The shadows writhed like living things, their shapes changing and contorting as if engaged in a sinister dance. "Get out while you can." The woman's whisper echoed in my mind, the weight of her warning heavy and foreboding. But escape was a distant dream now, my feet shackled to this nightmarish reality, incapable of relenting. "Hello?" I called out, the tremor in my voice barely masking the terror within. The air thickened with tension as the flickering overhead lights buzzed, illuminating the room's Remnantsa hospital gurney, gutted and splattered with dried stains, whispered of lives lost and tormented. Something rustled in the corner, a shadow shifting and elongating. I turned, heart racing as the darkness shed a familiar form, a gaunt figure emerging, a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. Her hair hung in wild tangles, obscuring her face, but 2 sunken eyes glimmered beneath the matted strands. "Help me," she croaked, her voice an ethereal echo, a ghost tugging painfully at heartstrings long dulled by horror. "What happened to you?" I asked in a whisper, torn between empathy and an overwhelming sense of dread. Her gaze locked onto mine, and in that moment, I saw a flicker of something, an agonizing plea, perhaps a shared understanding that stretched beyond time. I felt the urge to reach out, to comfort her, but a chill slithered down my spine as the shadows writhed, a silent warning of the danger she embodied. "They tease me," the girl murmured, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "The bad doctors come at night, they play games with our minds. They want you too." The words washed over me like icy water, and my heart raced at the implication. "Who? What do you mean?" She pointed behind me, her finger trembling. My gaze followed as the shadows began to swirl, revealing dark eyes that blinked into existence, figures cloaked in hospital gowns, their mouths stitched shut with barbed wire. They hovered, a distorted collection of suffering, each one reflecting the myriad of pain that consumed this hellish domain. The sight drove me backward, colliding with the wall as the figures began to move. They surged toward me, a tidal wave of anguish and despair swarming with an insatiable hunger. I turned to run but found my path barred, the door sealed shut, throbbing with the pulse of the otherworldly. Stay with them, the shadows breathed in unison. Voices layered over one another, a choir of the damned. Stay and share our truth. The girl took a step closer, confusion mingling with fear as I backed away. You have to help me. Don't let them take you. But the shadows thrummed with malevolence, tightening their grip. Somehow, I knew that freedom wouldn't come from running. I had to confront what lay beneath the surface, what these twisted beings held within their haunted souls. The girl's eyes pleaded with mine as the figures advanced, the incessant whispers crescendoing to a deafening roar. You have to choose, she screamed, her voice carrying power that cut through the chaos. Join us or drown alone. And then, without warning, the walls began to bleed, streams of dark crimson pooling at my feet as the air thickened, suffocating in its intensity. The figures surged forward, arms outstretched, grotesque and desperate. Just before they engulfed me, the girl's voice pierced the chaos again, a solitary scream that belied her childlike innocence. Remember. With that, the world erupted in brilliant light, a blinding flash that swallowed the shadows whole, and I felt the ground tremor beneath me, the weight of 1,000 memories crashing down. Memories I had buried deep, the secrets I had long forgotten, and in that blink of an eye, everything changed, the flickering fluorescent lights flickering wildly, illuminating a new horror. The reflection of countless faces in the shards of the broken mirror, all screaming, all pleading in army of the forgotten. And as the light flickered one last time, a single word echoed through the void, chilling my very core. Run. I turned, forcing my legs to move even as a pair of cold fingers curled around my ankle, dragging me backward toward the shadows. And deep within, I could hear the dawning Laftera cacophony of voices merging with my own, weaving truths I could never face. My lungs burned, my heart raced. What awaited me was unimaginable. Just as I reached the door, I felt the darkness pulse, surging forward like tidal waves, surrounding me in an inescapable embrace. I was not alone. I never had been, and they were coming for me. The very air crackled with a palpable dread as I stood frozen, like prey caught in a predator's gaze. The laughter twisted around me, melodic yet sinister, a chorus that resonated with both madness and despair. I wrestled with the knowledge that I was far from safe, even as I clutched the cold metal of the door handle, every fiber of my being screaming for escape. But the moment I twisted the knob, I felt a grotesque force push back a wall of darkness that enveloped me in its suffocating embrace, dragging me deeper into its maw. Behind me, the figures writhed and twisted, their stitched mouths curling into grotesque grins. They were relentless, their eyes deep, impenetrable voids, smoldering with unholy anticipation. Join us, they hissed, the whisper a chilling caress against my ear. Each voice harmonized with the others, amplifying my terror into an almost unbearable crescendo. Let me go, I screamed, the panic clawing at my throat. I pulled against the shifting shadows that attempted to yank me back into their grasp. But then, an impossibly cold sensation snaked around my ankle. The girl, the one who had called for help, held fast to my leg, her pale face now more vividly warped, eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. There's no escape, she uttered, voice eerily calm, masked beneath a layer of anguish. You are one of us now. You just don't know it yet. Her words slithered like ice through my veins, banishing any remnants of hope. With a heart-rocking jolt of compassion, I gazed down at her. I wanted so desperately to reassure her, to believe that together we could fight against the encroaching darkness. But her pale fingers tightened around my ankle, her despair leaching into my marrow as the figures drew even closer. The walls vibrated with every tormenting pulse of their malevolence, shadows shifting into shapes too twisted to comprehend. And then, in a fleeting moment of clarity, I realized what the girl meant by remember. My mind spiraled back to lost moments, shadows of fear, echoes of suffering, faces of patients who had begged for help but had fallen silent in this wretched place. I saw the reflection of those faces in the broken shards of the mirror that now littered the floor. each visage distorted with agony and longing. They reached out with pleading eyes. I could feel their stories, their tragedies, tethering me to this horrifying reality. No, I shouted, shaking my head violently as if I could cast them off like a serpent shedding its skin. I won't become part of this. The moment of defiance was enough to unleash a storm. The laughter crescendoed to a fevered pitch, tumbling over itself like waves crashing over jagged rocks. I could feel the windows vibrate, the very foundations of the place groaning under the weight of the past. Suddenly, shadows peeled back like layers of skin, revealing horrific images with inpatients strapped onto gurneys. Their eyes wide, terror etched into every feature. "Help us," they implored, voices layered like an unholy chant. I stumbled backward, my heart thrumming violently as I ached to cover my ears, to pardon myself from their haunted cries. But the darkness wouldn't relent. It consumed everything, fusing the wretched cries into one relentless sound. "Leave her," a voice shrieked from among the figures, a twisted horror that blinded me with primal fear. One figure, taller and more grotesque than the rest, emerged from the thrumming throng, limbs elongated, limbs gnarled like the roots of a dead tree. Red eyes gleamed with a malevolent satisfaction. "This is your place now, and they will remember you, always," the figure sneered, and the laughter intensified. My mind faltered, reeling from the gravity of its proclamation. "You are tethered to their darkness, like all who came before you." In defiance, I fought to pull free from the taint of fear wrapping around me like a shroud. The girl's voice floated from below, calm yet tragic. "You have to ask for help. Please, before it's too late," as if compelled by some invisible force. I tore my gaze from the horror before me and shouted, "Help me! Someone! Please! Get me out of here!" The echo of my plea mixed with the screams surrounding me, merging into a symphony of desperation. For a fleeting second, the laughter dimmed. It was only the barest flicker of hesitation. But in that moment, new shadows around me began to shuffle, their expressions changing from torment to rage. I caught echoes of whispers, rising in vigor like a tide. "You shouldn't have called for help." Suddenly, the energy in the air shifted. The shadows surged like a storm unleashed, crashing against me, a wave of malice eager to claim its prize. I could hear the girl's voice calling over the tumult, fractured and fading as she strained against the tide. "I'm sorry." "No, you're so close." I felt the world collapse around me, the sounds of whispers merging with shrieks, consuming all rational thought. Just as I gathered the last vestige of courage to turn and run once more, the girl's fingers released me, falling into the depths of the swirling fray, and I felt the darkness swell, hungry and terrible, and as these tortured souls lunged for me, their ragged mouths contorted in exultation, the mirror shards surged, reflecting thousand screams that came crashing toward me. With nowhere left to turn, my breath hitched in my throat as they finally lunged, and the echoes of their laughter crescendoed to a deafening roar, drowning out everything as the edges of my vision went dark. I braced for the storm around me, the truth unraveling as dread intertwined with my destiny. The void rushed over me, its swirling depths both suffocating and electric, filling my lungs with a cold, damp agony. Each shadow gripped me tighter, dragging me back into their collective wail cacophony of despair that clouded my senses. Faces flitted past me, ghostly visages twisted in their final moments, reflecting what they once were. I felt their regret, their fear entwined with mine, as I plunged further into the hell that was this place. Suddenly, I was hollow adrift in a vast, oppressive chasm, no longer knowing where my body ended and theirs began. I gasped for air, choking on the overwhelming density of memories that surged like rioting waters. Laughter echoed anew, but now it was raw with pain, a haunting lullaby infused with the agony of the damned. "Help us," the chorus begged simultaneously, melding with the remnants of my own shattered plea. Each syllable scraped against my mind, blurring the lines between my identity and the myriad souls that clung desperately to existence. Each one a mirage of torment. In the instance that followed, the shadows twisted and contorted around me, morphing into fleeting silhouettes, figures I hadn't yet glimpsed. Nurses with eyes hollow as the dark voids that had become all too familiar. Patients, faces stretched in horror. Families, their releases twisted into grotesque frozen screams. They reached for me, their hands outstretched like vines wrapped in despair. "Stay with us," they seemed to chant, the rhythm lulling me, attempting to anchor me in a web of shared suffering. Just as I began to succumb to their pull, a single shadow detached itself and lunged forward. Within a heartbeat, it transformed into the sharp image of the girl, her expression a mix of defiance and desperation. She screamed, eyes ablaze with intensity. "You must resist them. Remember who you are." But it was too late for her. The shadows behind her swelled at her words, thrumming with anger, swirling like a dark cyclone, desperate to reclaim their own. The space around me shifted, twisting as I stood at the precipice of oblivion, teetering between realization and hysteria. "Your memories are ours," the towering figure I had glimpsed earlier bellowed, fracturing the air with its reverberating voice. "You cannot escape the truths buried within." Suddenly, the laughter shattered into 1,000 shards of glass, an outpouring of rage erupting like a volcanic surge. It engulfed my surroundings, the turbulent shadows reforming and morphing into a nightmarish landscape, the abandoned corridors of a hospital, decked in peeling paint and mottled with gray, waves of pure dread rippling through every corner. Every door I glimpsed through swirling vortexes led back to memories of suffering a patient collapsing in the hall, a doctor laughing maniacally, patients clawing at the walls, frantically seeking escape only to be trapped forever. This wasn't a hospital. It was a prison, a purgatory clad in the guise of healing. "Join us," the shadows whispered, and before I could fully grasp the horror, the ground beneath me began to tremble. The fissures spread like veins through the floor, blooming with a sickly green light that pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Suddenly, with a crack of haunting thunder, the floor gave way, plunging me into a desperately dark pit that screamed with anguish. As I fell, I grasped desperately onto the fraying threads of my own existence. Voices screamed around me, ripping through my sanity, a discordant choir of despair that crescendoed into a single word. "Remember!" My heart raced. Flashes of faces sped before my doctors with wide, unseeing eyes, patients caked in blood and bound in chains, each detail slashing me with truths I wished never to uncover. Something primal stirred deep within me, a hidden strength that begged to rise above the seething darkness. Through the chaos, a vision emerged. The girl once more, now chaotic yet determined in her efforts to break free. "You're stronger than them," she screamed, even as shadows coiled around her, pulling her back. "You can resist. Don't let them take you." But just as hope flared, a deeper shadow loomed, consuming her with a gust of darkness that hissed like steam. "She lies. They are the past," it spat, and in that moment, as she reached for me one last time, the fissures erupted an explosion of pure darkness that ruptured the air, raining bitter sh that I in the cacophony. I felt loss weighing heavy like a shroud, her form fading into the oppressive gloom. "Fight!" Her voice echoed one last time before all that remained was a resounding silence. Thick and suffocating, the ground under me began to shift again, and panic clawed at my throat as I realized the abyss beneath me glimmered ominously. Dim outlines of figures, indistinguishable yet urgent, began to attach themselves to reality. They were ready to ensnare me, ready for my choice, my submission that I in that moment of fervent desperation. The very walls of existence warped and buckled, and it became clear that the only way to escape this nightmare was through the embrace of the darkness itself. I screeched, backing away from the abyss threatening to swallow me whole. But as I turned towards an escape, I felt the icy grip of despair snag at my heels, rushing forward as the shadows amassed behind me at an alarming speed, their rage colliding with my panic. I was trapped, ensnared in a seat of torment as the figures closed in, their melding screams hinting at the horrors yet to unfold. I stood at the edge of my existence, the pivotal moment between succumbing or escaping the relentless tide. And then, just as I thought I had made my choice, a hand gripped my wrist cold as ice, outstretched from the dark, pulling me back as meandering whispers flooded in. "Stay with us, stay forever." Panic surged anew as the shadows began to envelop me, the abyss inching closer, And I realized in this moment of suspended horror, I might lose the last thread of my will to survive. In the eyes of terror, another choice loomed, one I must make quickly before I lost everything. And as the grip tightened, the last vestige of light flickered, threatening to extinguish forever, my very essence dangling between redemption and eternal damnation. The grasp of ice around my wrist sent electric shocks up my arm, igniting primal fear deep within my core, urging me to fight against the encroaching void. I couldn't succumb to the whispers that curled around my thoughts, promising to keep me safe yet binding me to this twisted purgatory. Let go, I screamed, wrenching my arm away, but the shadow only clung tighter, as though it thirsted for my anguish. You don't understand. You'll never break free. Those words dripped with malevolence, setting the air to shuddering silence. My breath quickened, each gasp tasting of burnt copper, raising the hair on my neck. The pressed shadows shimmered in agony, twisting into grotesque forms that looped in and out of recognition, faces of the past merging into a vortex of suffering. In this dim world, clarity shattered as I saw a flicker of something, a memory long buried, momentarily illuminating the darkness. A flicker of a white room, detergent and antiseptic invading my senses, juxtaposed against the decay of these worn walls. A hospital hallway. My hospital. Remember, the figures behind me pleaded, their voices now a whispering wind that chilled me to the bone. I could feel their desperation melding with my own. I whipped around, surveying the gaunt, elongated faces, each one a snapshot of suffering that slowly transformed into understanding. Find the truth. One ghostly figure shrieked, eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't name. It was as if they were urging me toward something buried beneath layers of dread. Something sinister that reverberated through the very essence of this place. But the shadow still held me firmly, pulling me closer as if winding itself around my soul. It's too late for you, it hissed. You chose this path with each decision made. I closed my eyes, desperate to drown out the cacophony. I needed to remember. I needed to escape. Another image clawed its way to the forefront of my Minda child, small and fragile, tangled in sheets on a hospital bed. I could feel the sharp sting of tears stinging my cheeks, a wave of guilt crashing over me. Doctor, you need to help. The child's small, trembling voice echoed in the depths of my memory, desperation laced in each syllable. A desperate cry transformed into shrieks that made my chest tighten. The epiphany clawed its way to clarity. You were supposed to save me. Suddenly, the shadows released their grip, recoiling as if stung. It was my realization that had shifted the balance. A flicker of rebellion ignited within the darkness. Drawn by the energy of my recognition, I stumbled backward, shoving through the tumult of despair such that the walls of this cruel realm began to pulse in sync with my thudding heart. They were losing their power. No! The shadows cried in tortured unison, churning violently as the atmosphere thickened with a palpable sense of dread, threatening to smother me whole. You cannot escape your past. You are bound to us. Gripping the edges of fading sanity, I turned back toward the abyss, the raging vocalizations of emptiness echoing in the pit where the light had once gleamed. With every ounce of strength, I thrust my arm into the shadows, reaching for the flickering visage I had seen, one very much like mine, cradling desperation. Help me! The words were a prayer, a plea. The figures around me faded momentarily, leaving space for a new and darker silhouette, taller, horrifically familiar, a reflection of impending crowning suffering as it loomed closer. My breath caught in my throat. It was a faceless apparition of malice. Each step it took pulsating through the ground beneath my feet, the weight of its rot an unbearable burden. The memories twisted deeper into the soil where it tread, melding with raw malice, releasing a tide of wailing that twisted every raw nerve. Yet among the rancid terror, in that very moment, I felt the hope of connection, the girl from before, her presence reignited amidst the swell of shadows. I chose to fight, just like you must. Find the truth. It's hidden within. My truth? I breathed, latching onto her encouraging words, new fury flooding my core as I reached back into the vast caverns of my memory, hammering away the chains of guilt that had held me captive. The darkness erupted in response, eroding my strength with a violent howl that shook the walls of my prison. And as the hideous figure crested closer, sinister fingers extended as if to claw away what little light remained, the girl's voice morphed into a thunderous warning. "It's closer than you think." Just as I thought I could slither back from its grasp, the walls around me convulsed and buckled, revealing whispers from each crack, dark secrets suffocating the very air. I could sense them closing in, hungry for my despair. Each echoing scream wove tighter around me as the truth clawed its way toward the surface. And then, it struck me like a shard of glass, me linked to this hell, wrapped in memories, entwined with the very essence of those I had failed. A throbbing pulse behind my eyes, the sinister laugh of the embodiment before me reverberated, drowning out everything, closing in like the tightening veil of a noose as the shadow lunged. I understood the truth. In my blood lay the echoes of fear, of defeat, but in my heart, the flicker of rebellion remained. Seized by pain yet burning with determination, I lunged toward the hidden truth at the depths of my mind. But just as I grasped what could be my salvation, a bone-chilling realization began to seep through me, freezing my insides and expanding into horror. The laughter echoed back, transforming into a chilling proclamation that resonated deeply. "The truth is yours to uncover. But remember, every choice has its price." And just like that, darkness surged once more, a final wave ripping through me. As I felt the ground beneath me slip away, me scream caught somewhere between the grip of the abyss and the inescapable presence of the monstrous entity that would claim me before the truth ever crossed my lips. The ground shifted, a sickening lurch that sent me tumbling into the shadows, swallowed whole by the abyss. I braced for the impact, nothing but void surrounding me as the insidious laughter echoed, filling the space with a sense of dread too heavy to bear. I landed with a soft thud, surrounded by blackness and a disorienting silence that was almost worse than the cacophony before. Tentatively, I pushed up from the cold, damp ground, my fingers brushing against something slick, something that felt alarmingly like flesh. I jerked away, panic clawing at my throat. I wasn't alone. A whisper of movement ghosted past my ear, dragging the chill of gooseflesh through me. I strained my eyes, searching for any hint of light, but the darkness was absolutely a suffocating blanket that dulled my senses, drowning out all rational thought. Suddenly, fragmented images shot through my mind like lightning, illuminating the emptiness around me. The child's screams echoed, and I felt the burden of my choices tightening around me, squeezing until only the pulse of fear resonated in my veins. Flashes of sterile rooms and the acrid scent of antiseptics merged with the shrieks of the forsaken. It was all tangled chaos. We were abandoned. A voice seeped into the silence, chillingly intimate. I turned, heart racing, but the direction was lost, swallowed by the pervasive darkness. "You left us here." A cold sweat trickled down my spine, recognition tumbling through layers of horror. I had felt their echoes, those spirits trapped within this realm alongside me. The weight of guilt was palpable, pressing down until I felt raw, exposed. Would I ever be free? "You think you can escape?" The voice was a deceptive cradle of serenity wrapped in malice. Suddenly, I noticed the glimmer of pale, ghostly figures flickering in and out from the corners of my vision. Faces etched in despair, staring blankly at me, begging for salvation. "You left us behind. Now we follow you. Go away." I screamed, throwing up my arms as the wraiths swarmed, whispering incoherent promises, memories long ruptured coming back to haunt me, shadows of my failures trailing like chains anchored deep in the void. My breath quickened, and I stumbled backward, desperate to break free. Yet as I retreated, the laughter crescendoed, growing louder, merging with the chants of the spirits. The shadows thickened, swirling around my legs like rushing water and dragging me toward something darker, more sinister. "You can't escape the sins that bore you," the monstrous voice echoed, mocking me with each word. "Please," I whimpered, collapsing against the cold stone floor, feeling the pulse of the darkness throbbing beneath me. Despair clawed at my insides, but deep down, I could feel the echo of the girl's courage, fighting against the tide. The shadows surged forward, engulfing me completely. Just as I thought I would drown in the malignant sea, A burst of light flickered within me. A desperate resolve ignited against the onslaught. "You have no power over me," I shouted, summoning every ounce of defiance to rise against their suffocating grip. For a heartbeat, the shadows flinched, the wails morphed into frantic gasps, and for the briefest moment, I felt a crack in the darkness. It was then that I saw Ida glimmer of white, a vision unfurling like an ancient scroll. My hands reached out instinctively, yearning for it, but the shadows recoiled, screeching in unified horror. "Not the truth," they wailed, clawing at me, yanking with chilling fingers that felt like ice burning into my flesh. I was teetering on the brink of something monumental, a storm of fear brewing within as I felt the stirrings of a far more sinister reality. "Unravel the veil." The girl's voice surged through the din, emboldening me, urging me to see past the madness. "Find what lies beneath." The weight of the nightmare pressed down, but this time I took a step forward, digging my heels into the ground. I felt the layers peel away, revealing the whispers of my past, hidden truths now clawing to the surface as I confronted my demons and the sinister. Specters that sought to devour me whole. But beneath the veil of shadows, I sensed something else, a memory tainted by time, etched with blood and sorrow. And there, woven into the very fabric of despair, pulsed a heart-stopping revelation. The realization flooded through me like ice-cold water, crystallizing the pain of my past. "I have to remember," I gasped, the rapt memories battling against the cries of the lost. "I must know." With one last surge of will, I peeled back the fog shrouding my mind, intent on risking everything to uncover the truth. A chilling breeze swept through the darkness, swirling whispers crescendoing into a terrifying tempest as visions barreled forth as the darkness thinned, revealing outlines of cold silver. I gasped. The stench of decay climbed up my throat, sending waves of nausea crashing over me like a storm. The world shifted around me. They were here, those I had both saved and failed. A grotesque tableau of grief emerged from the shadows, eyes shining with hopelessness, faces twisted in both adoration and accusation. And within the cacophony of echoes, my gaze locked onto a singular face. The child from the hospital bed, eyes wide and glistening. "You were supposed to save me. Now look at what you've done." Before I could respond, the whispers escalated into a howling fury, igniting the darkness once more as it surged to reclaim me. My heart seized. There was no escaping the truth that lay ahead. I was not only facing the horrors of my past, I was teetering on the edge of uncovering the very abyss from which my fears had been born, and just as the shadows lunged at me, a piercing light erupted, sending the figures scattering, their anguished wails ringing in my ears. The blinding brightness unveiled a door, ajar, beckoning me forward. But behind me, the laughter returned, now not just eerie, but triumphant. "Step through if you dare, but remember," the monstrous whisper curled around me as the entity grew closer, its presence suffocating. "Every door reveals what you wish remained hidden." With every heartbeat hammering against my rib cage, drowning out the screams, I gripped the handle of the door, my body trembling with the weight of choice. What lay on the other side? And would I have the strength to confront what I'd long buried? In that split second, I threw open the door, plunging into a new nightmare, but felt the grasp of the shadows reach out for me once more, the palpable cold creeping up my spine. The threshold was crossed. Now there was no turning back, but as I stepped into the light, a horrific realization washed over Meth. Dark entity, the one that relished in fear, had not vanished. It lingered at the door's threshold, biding its time, waiting for me to falter. "You can never truly escape," it jeered. "You will always return one way or another." And with that, the darkness engulfed the door once again, leaving only a hollow laugh echoing in its wake, and me standing amidst the unknown, terrified of the secrets I would soon uncover. I stood in the blinding light, the sterile corridor stretching endlessly around me, yet it felt like a twisted reflection of the nightmarish realm I had just escaped. My heart raced in my chest, each thump a deafening reminder of the dread that had accompanied me throughout this harrowing descent into darkness. The whispers of the abandoned echoed in my ears still, haunting yet insistent. "Remember," they teased, words slipping through the cracks of my mind like tendrils of shadow creeping back into my soul. I shook my head violently, desperate to rid myself of the specters that clung to me, their presence as heavy as the stench of decay that filled the air. But no sooner had I turned my back to the door than a searing pain shot up my spine, a cold, clawing grip around my heart. Panic constricted my throat. I staggered steps backward but found the hallway hadn't changed. I was still in the same hospital but now shrouded in an uncanny familiarity, yet palpably wrong. Behind me, the door loomed ominously, closed once more, as if it had never existed. There was no escape from either side. Did you really think you could leave? A voice purred, curling around my mind like smoke curling from a dying flame. The laughter, sickly sweet and malicious, reverberated against the sterile walls and seeped into my skin. You are part of us now, an eternal guardian of secrets. You can never forget. Chilled to the marrow, I turned to see the gaunt figure I had encountered before, the embodiment of despair, skin taut against a skeletal frame. It grinned, revealing blackened gums and teeth like jagged stones. Welcome back. This is only the beginning. You will remember everything. The shadows around it seemed to wriggle and pulse, eager to retake their hold on my mind. I clenched my eyes shut, trying to summon the strength I had felt moments earlier. I was stronger than this. Open your eyes. The command rattled through me, and with hesitance, I forced myself to face the truth that lay before me. Reality flickered like a faulty light bulb, the walls shimmering with a strange energy, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as if they, too, sensed the looming horror. Such a familiar sight. I recognized the nurse's station, but it was no longer covered in dust and decay. It was brightened by life, those same twisted employees bustling around. Their smiles were wide, grins carved into their faces, but they were not genuine, too tightly stretched, too eager. The whispers crawled back over me, igniting something deep with inner revelation lingering just out of reach. Join us, they sang, a dissonant melody that threaded itself through the fabric of my being. Leave me alone, I screamed, and the echoes of my plea roared back. I could feel the weight of their anguish cocooning me. Their sorrow crashed over me like waves, pulling me under into the depths of despair. The vibrations morphed into elemental fear, and against my better judgment, I stepped forward. The glistening floor shimmered under my feet, an illusion of safety pulled taut like a fraying thread. Spotting a familiar face, I froze. It was the little girl again, the flickering flame of hope amongst their darkness. You're not safe. You need to remember. I need to get out of here. My words trembled, the urgency spilling from my lips. No, you must discover the truth. The girl's eyes widened, her fragile fingers stretching toward me. Confront what was hidden. Unravel what binds you. But the shadows began to grow thicker. Walls constricted, dark tendrils slithering eagerly around my ankles, dragging me into the abyss. You can't forget what's been lost, the figure whispered, directly in my ear, a putrid breath of decay washing over me. Eyes wide and flooded with fear, I gasped as reality twisted once more. Images flooded my mind, the very horrors I had tried to bury. I saw patients pushed aside, lost in the sterile machinery, noises of their fading heartbeats absorbed by the walls that had once promised hope. Was it me? Had I been one of them? What had I let slip through my fingers? They needed me, the whispered truths clawed for acknowledgement, and in their pleading cries, I felt the darkness of the shadowy entity wrap tighter around my will. You're part of us now, no. Couldn't give in. The flicker of hope pulsed bright. I remembered the truth I tucked away like a disease, and with it came a surge of strength. You're wrong. I won't let you consume me, I shouted, steeling myself against the onslaught of despair, pushing through the smothering darkness clawing at my very being. My surroundings began to ripple like a mirage, the figures blinking into view and fading like whispers in the night. I focused on the girl's small, determined face, the fierceness in her eyes reclaiming the vestiges of my sanity. Choose to remember. Fight back, she urged, the depths of her courage sparking my own. It pulsed to life within me, an anthem against the encroaching tide of despair. Help me remember. I screamed, tearing through the fabric of the shadows, the air vibrating with the force of my proclamation. I could see the figures thrashing, distortion roiling around them as the darkness crackled with my defiance. The laughter became shrill, the shadows recoiling as I stepped forward into the glow, hands pushing through as though breaking free from restraints that had bound me for eons. And with a blinding flash, clarity erupted me past my failures. But even within the sorrow slept an ember of truth. I won't be a guardian of twisted nightmares. I choose my own path. As those final words echoed from my lips, the malice thickening around me shattered. The darkness fell away like a veil, revealing a world fractured by the choices I had made, the lives I had overlooked. The echo receded. Maybe this was my truth, a terrifying reflection of the darkness. But in its wake, a promise flickered, a path back home. But as I turned to leave, the lingering shadows hissed with a vengeance, entwining around my legs one last time. You can't break free. Well, be back. The haunting laughter erupted into a deafening chorus, pushing against my resolve. Fear clawed at my insides, and just as I was about to slip into the obscurity, I felt the girl's presence beside me. You're not done yet. The shadows recoiled at her stark confidence as I took a step forward, defiant against the darkness. Not this time, I shouted, pushing through the threshold toward liberation, shattering the bonds that held me to that cursed place. And just before the shadows could retake me, I reached the light. The world outside, brimming with life and hope, surged into view. I was free, but the lingering laughter echoed behind me, whispering a dreadful reminder until the last trace of it faded away. With every heartbeat reverberating in my chest, I embraced the knowledge. Not every horror disappears. Some may linger, demanding recognition. Others may follow as I stepped into the world anew. The chilling thought seized my heart. What if the nightmares had only just begun? Because now I finally remember my true role. I am their keeper. And with those last dread-filled thoughts, I walked onward, shadows trailing right behind.